All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Koch, and I'm a senior associate with Roadside and Harwell in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And today I am coming to you as a representative of the APA Sustainable Communities Division. We're excited to kick off a series of student webinars. We have a very quickly growing student membership, and we're excited to talk with you all about what your questions might be in terms of being a planner and what you might want to get out of the division membership. And so this is going to be a very interactive discussion, and we're looking forward to it. I will note that today, as part of the interaction, just to further introduce the division, we like to do a little intro. Sort of our mission statement is that APA Sustainable Communities Division supports planners who are committed to planning for sustainable communities by integrating all aspects of sustainability into our work through the combined economic, social, and ecological factors that shape our communities. As always, we kick off our webinars by recognizing that we have a great group of sponsors that helps us get things done, including sponsoring our ability to do webinars. Our sponsors for this year include Clarion, Criterion, Dewberry, MC, Farr Associates, HAF, Montgomery Associates, Niche Engineering, Planning Communities, Robinson and Cole, Smith Group, Tesca, Urban Works, the Urban Collaborative, and the University of Florida Online Masters of Urban and Regional Planning. So it's a large group, and we're grateful to have them. If you are not aware, you can reach us in many different ways. The division has a formal website on the APA website, but we also have a blog site, which is where we have things like our e-bulletins backed up. That's where you can sign up for those. We also have webinar archives on there. For example, this webinar is being recorded and will be put up on the webinar archive. But we also have social media pages and an email address at which you can reach us. So don't be shy to reach out, especially if you are interested in volunteering with the division. We would love to hear from you. So for today's agenda, we're going to start out with our current chair, Matt Buchin, will be giving an introduction to the division, providing you with some background information, recognizing that we have a lot of new members. So if you're a current member, you've been around for a while, some of this might be information you know, but we'll just give you a little reminder about what we do. You'll then hear from our student representatives, Fiona Coughlin and Kate Popple. They will tell you a bit about what their role is with the division and some exciting activities coming up. Then you'll hear from Matt Buchin, our current chair, and Scott Turner, the former chair of the division, about some of their background in terms of being a planning professional. And we'll continue that discussion with a Q&A session at the end. And so to submit your questions, please feel free to do this throughout. We really want as many questions as we can get. If we can't answer them all by 2 o'clock, we'll get answers posted somewhere else, I promise. So in order to do the Q&A, we're going to use the Q&A function that is built into the AnyMeeting system. This picture here shows you how they'll show up on our screen as presenters. And if you go up, it should be a little bubble at the top of your page that allows you to submit a question. So we'll keep track of them in that way. You can also contact the presenters, including me, on the attendee chat portal. So if you have any issues with technical issues or you can't figure out how to get to the Q&A or anything like that, feel free to chat us up there and we'll figure it out. That being said, I will pass it off to Matt to give an overview of the division.
Thank you, Jenny. And as Jenny mentioned, my name is Matt Buchin. I'm the current chair of the Sustainable Communities Division. We are, for those that don't know, we are one of 21 divisions delineated by functional topic. So each one of the 21 divisions focuses on something in particular that they're trying to advance, which separates ourselves from the various chapters that are really a delineation of a geographic area. Our division organization is, we really only have 2 elected positions, but 3 that are members of the official executive committee. That's the division chair, our secretary-treasurer position, and our past chair or past secretary-treasurer position. Each one of those are consecutive, and they will overlap at any given time. And those are kind of our elected positions, but really our backbone of the organization is really focused on our strong group of volunteer leaders. We have several acting in committee positions or committee leadership positions. Jenny has always focused on kind of leading up our education and practice division, where she manages all of our educational webinars and our awards program every year. We have Ann Miller, who has led up our leadership and policy division, or our committee, focusing on the Sustainability Champion program, as well as other APA research initiatives. And then our communications position, which is a leadership role focused on our e-bulletins and social media, our newsletter, et cetera. Now, the leader position in that particular category is currently vacant, but we have several other volunteers that are moving forward various functions and keeping that moving forward, such as our bi-weekly e-bulletin. At any given time, we have a series of ongoing programs and projects that we are supporting all throughout the year. One is our award-winning Sustainability Champions focus. This program was where we had we've kind of moved back into taking our discussion of sustainable communities and said we don't want to get so far disassociated from our geographic area. We wanted to make sure that this functional topic really had a geographic push. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we established the program, and right now, as we'll see in the next slide, we have 11 champions currently serving specific geographic regions in the country. Every year, we do have our awards for excellence in sustainability. And later this week, we'll be honoring our awardees for our 6th annual awards program in 6 categories. That is something that we have led for many of the divisions, and a lot of our divisions have asked us to kind of pass along our framework. 2 additional divisions this year established programs as well based on our program, the Tech Division for their Smart City Awards, as well as the International Awards. Our annual student essay contest is something that we do annually, and it is currently going on. I believe the due date on that is somewhere in May. I don't know the exact date. I think Fiona and Kate will talk about that. And all throughout the year, we have various educational webinars. And for the past, since 2013, which I'll talk about later, we have managed or led the sustainability, or the Smart Cities and Sustainability Initiative for APA. And we also led the update to the overarching sustainability framework for APA, which is kind of this overarching umbrella document for a lot of the other policy guides that are out there. So where do we go? Where do we come from numbers? You know, when we think about the Sustainable Communities Division, this really was initiated back in 2007. A group of planners got together at a conference and said, we really want to establish a conversation on sustainable communities. By 2009, we had an official interest group, and by 2012, we had hit our first year as an official division. Today, we went from basically 0 members to 4,505 division members. We are the 3rd largest division in only a few short years. Out of that, we have 3,837 student members who are being guided by our 2 student leaders. Separate from all those numbers, we have 5,289 e-bulletin recipients. So every other week we send out an e-bulletin. This is something you should have seen in the student welcome letter that we sent out a couple weeks ago. But basically providing ongoing communication throughout the year, whether or not you're a division member or not. Where do we want to go from here? Some of the things we're talking about for the upcoming year are completing our first Sustainable Communities Division strategic plan, basically saying we're now, almost 10 years into our existence as an official division. How do we keep ourselves relevant? How do we keep ourselves in the forefront of the emerging discussion and the big changes that are occurring in sustainable communities, whether we're talking about climate change or resilience or whatever it might be, or even things that may be on the horizon, like biophilic communities, things of that sort. How do we continue to provide leadership on our smart cities and other planning initiatives, continuing to build relationships with our allied members. For sure, we want to focus on expanding our volunteer efforts and making sure that we're providing proper programming for our students and other members out there. So there's some of the things that we're talking about kind of continuing making advances on. Jenny?
Great, thanks, Matt. Now with that sort of keeping in mind what the whole structure of the division is, I'll pass it off to our new student, or relatively new, I guess, student representatives to give an overview of that portion of our work.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Fiona Coughlin, and I am the one of the two student co-representatives for the Sustainable Communities Division. I've been involved with the organization for coming up on about 2 years now. I am a practicing planner out of Massachusetts who recently received her master's degree in city planning from Boston University and her undergraduate degree in urban and regional planning from Framingham State University. Where in both of those universities, I was heavily involved in outreach, coordination, club organization, and networking opportunities. So I'm very happy to be working with SCD on any and all student initiatives, including our student essay contest, social media updates, networking events, and things of that nature. My interests lie in smart growth, new urbanism, open space and conservation, and as being a student co-representative, one of my many duties is staying connected with you folks, hearing you, any ideas, thoughts, or concerns you have, any interested volunteers, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the slide deck provided, and I look forward to engaging with you further. And thank you again for joining part one of our student webinar series. And I will turn it over to Kate Papel, our other student co-representative.
Hey guys, I'm Kate. I'm originally from Ohio and went to UC, University of Cincinnati, for my undergrad in planning and urban design. And then I just finished up my master's last year in both landscape architecture and urban planning. So I've had a lot more experience thus far, work experience in the planning realm, public, private, nonprofit, you name it. But I've now kind of transitioned over to working at a master planning and landscape architecture firm in Florida called EDSA, and I have quite a bit of international experience as well. So with that said, just to echo what Fiona said, feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions or you're interested in getting more involved. I think the Sustainable Communities Division is definitely one of the more active divisions that I've realized in my time with APA the last almost decade. So feel free to reach out, and we hope that we can only better your experience. Thanks.
Great. Would you all like to give an overview of the student meet and greet that's coming up at the conference?
So I can go ahead and take this one, Fiona. So I will be at the conference this upcoming week, and last year we hosted our first APA SCD student meet and greet, and it actually had a pretty good turnout of a few people that met at a coffee shop before the SCD business meeting, and we're planning on doing the same thing this year, but in San Francisco. So if you guys are around, Contraband Coffee Bar on 5th Street in San Francisco. We're looking at, again, meeting right before the business meeting, and if you have other plans afterwards, that's fine, but from 4 to 5 p.m., we'll be drinking some good coffee, hopefully, and then we can walk over to the business meeting and jump into that. So if you guys, again, have any questions, our emails are here, and if you can't make it at 4, but you can make it at 4:30, feel free to still stop by.
Great, sounds good. All right, so what we have planned to spend the majority of our time on today will be a Q&A session with both Kate and Fiona, as well as our two panelists, Matt Buchin and Scott Turner. So we wanted to give them both some time to sort of go over what their backgrounds are, tell you a bit about what they do now, and start, if you have any questions for them or for Fiona or Kate, again, please feel free to enter them as we go, and then we'll go over them in a bit. Matt?
Thanks, Jenny. Just kind of going through some of my background. As I previously mentioned, I'm the current division chair of the Sustainable Communities Division. Professionally, I work for a interdisciplinary architecture, landscape architecture, planning, engineering firm based out of Texas, or headquarters in Texas. We currently have 22 offices across Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Florida. And I lead a group of 18 planners and landscape architects who do anything from long-range comprehensive planning all the way through public park and trail design, through private land development and code regulations. So we kind of run the gamut from my team as part of a practice of about 65 planners and landscape architects. I've been with the company for about 5 years. And before that, I kind of led a diverse work history. I worked previously for 4 years for a national consulting firm, so I had the privilege of working with client communities all across the U.S., doing long-range planning, primarily focused on comprehensive planning and park master planning and unified development codes. Previous to that, I spent 5 years as a principal planner for a jurisdiction about 200,000 people north of Atlanta, Georgia, where I led a team of long-range and current planners, really responding to anything related to the development process. Before that, I spent 2 years with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources as a resource planner, doing project reviews or interdisciplinary project reviews from all the different disciplines in DNR for anything happening on state lands. And then, like most planners, or maybe not like most planners, my work experience prior to that was I spent 5 years up in Vail, Colorado as a structural and wildland firefighter. I kind of took a shift from the planning profession and went a different route for a couple of years. And then before that, I spent several years working with the city of Phoenix, trying to increase their public use of a public wetland constructed park, or constructed wetlands park. Education-wise, I got a Bachelor of Arts from Pennsylvania State University, or Penn State, and a business administration minor. It was really a choose-your-own-adventure liberal arts degree with a focus on environmental programs. And I literally came out the other side with no, I'll talk about this later, no internships, no work experience related to what I want to do, a liberal arts degree that was not marketable without doing something different. And I kind of researched what I really liked about all the things I had learned over the years. And kind of planning was really the intersect. So I didn't really come to planning, it's not something I always wanted to do, but that's really what led me to go get my master's degree in Arizona State University. And I defended my thesis on a Friday, and Saturday morning I packed up a U-Haul and moved to Vail for 5 years. And while I was in Vail, I got an associate's degree in fire science technology. And when we get to some of the questions and answers, I can provide some additional details on kind of how that went down. But one of the other things I just want to mention is that where I'm at today in my career is not only related to what I've done at the job place or at the workplace. A lot of it has been related to, at least in my later years, with my volunteer activities. And I started volunteering with APA in 2011 in their rebuilding initiative and focused on green infrastructure. And in 2012, I got involved with the Sustainable Communities Division and immediately got pulled into being the behind-the-scenes project manager for APA's Smart Cities and Sustainability Initiative. That was my introduction to the division. It's a program that I'm still involved with today as part of the Sustainable Communities Division, but that really was the springboard to years and years and years of volunteering with the division, which has primarily been my focus with APA's Sustainable Communities Division. And eventually that led to being division chair and getting the opportunity to work with a fantastic group of people for many, many years, one of which you're going to hear in about 2 seconds. Scott.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Scott Turner. I'm currently the Director of Planning at Niche Engineering in Boston. I am going to go through my background, my story, I guess, a little bit differently than Matt. Whereas Matt started from where he is now and went backwards, I'm going to start from the beginning and go forwards. So I started at Tufts University, which is a liberal arts and primarily a liberal arts school, just north of Boston. I started out in the civil engineering program and realized probably 2 years in that although I could do all of the math and I could do all of the calculations and so forth, and was probably interested in drawing up plans, that my interests were not necessarily aligned with a typical engineer's interest, so to speak. I realized early on that I wanted to do something that was a little bit more, had a little bit more community involvement, had a little bit more bigger picture focused, was not so interested in smaller site-specific projects, but had more big picture thinking and so forth. So I got out of school. I got out of school in the early 90s, 1991 to be exact. Which tells you how old I am. At that time, there weren't a whole lot of jobs. I ended up taking a job. There was a recession, not like the recession in 2010, but there was a recession in Massachusetts at that time. I took a job with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation as an the position was really environmental engineer, but it was more of a environmental analyst or environmental permitting position. I did that for a year because my job there was really to fill out permits. In Massachusetts, you have a law similar to NEPA called MEPA, the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. For a year or so, I spent doing environmental permitting related to Department of Transportation projects as they pertain to MEPA, or as they need MEPA. While I was there, I did a couple things. The first one is I took my engineer training exam. I did that really the reason I did that was because I wanted to, it was a requirement of my job, Mass DOT. They wanted everybody to have at least an EIT. So I went ahead and did that. And at the same time, I applied to graduate school to get my master's in city planning because I felt like that was really where I wanted to spend my time. I applied to a bunch of schools, decided to go to the Georgia Institute of Technology for two reasons. Well, three reasons, actually. One was it's a great school. Two, it was in Atlanta, which was far from where I lived, and I wanted to experience something different. And third, at that time, they were getting ready to plan for and host the 1996 Olympics. I thought that being in a city that was hosting an Olympics would be a cool place to be because you'd be able to see not only how the Olympics come together, but also potentially get involved with projects that pertain to the Olympics or help to run the Olympics. So my plan was to be there for a couple of years. I went through my first year at Georgia Tech. I got an internship at the Atlanta Regional Commission my first summer. Continued on a part-time basis through the first semester of my second year, and then I realized that I was low on cash. I needed some money. They had a position at ARC for an entry-level planner. So I took that job, and I went to school part-time for about a year to finish up my degree. So what that did was it gave me some experience, gave me a job. I knew I had a job getting out of school once I graduated. My supervisor at the time was very concerned that I actually wouldn't finish my degree, but I went through and I did that. Like I said, I was able to start my career in planning. Ironically, though, when I started at Georgia Tech, and one of the things that I didn't anticipate was that Georgia Tech is a very technical school, and I'm not sure if there's anybody on the phone from Georgia Tech, but when you go to planning school, there's different types of planning schools. Some are more policy-oriented, some are more technically oriented. When I was at Georgia Tech, my advisor was a professional engineer, and he focused on stormwater management. I'll never forget the first day I was there. He said to me, he said, "Whatever you do, make sure you get your professional engineer's license because it'll be an insurance policy in case anything goes sideways on the planning side." I thought to myself, it's not exactly what I want to hear because I'm trying to get away from engineering and I'm trying to do more work in planning. When I decided to move back to Boston, I decided, okay, well, I'll work for 4 years for an engineering company, get my degree in or get my professional engineer's license, and then turn around and do something different. Took a job at a firm called the BSC Group, which is local to New England, and after a few years, I was able to get my PE license. I was doing mostly site planning, site engineering, stormwater management, a little bit of traffic planning, and just because of circumstances and because of things like raises and promotions, I ended up staying there much longer than I wanted to. I was there for 13 years. At the time, while I was there, I was able to get my AICP credential, and so for a while I was a PE and an AICP. During the recession in 2008 to 2010, one of the things that happened was our company, which is primarily private land development, really struggled, because at that time there was not a whole lot of private site development. And so the president of our firm at Niche Engineering, Lisa Brothers, she started talking to me about coming over here and starting a planning department. And it was an interesting fit because of my planning background and my engineering background. I like the fact that I have both, because it gives me some versatility, and it also gave her confidence to that I was going to fit into the firm somehow if the planning side didn't work out. But really what attracted me to her was the AICP credential. And so it was very important that I had it. In fact, if I didn't have that AICP credential, I don't think I would have been offered the job here. So I've been here for 8 years. Our planning group has grown to 7 folks. We focus mostly on environmental planning, do a little bit of engineering because I do have clients that remain from my previous job that like to work with me, but mostly focus on green infrastructure and stormwater management, environmental planning. We're starting to do a little bit more bike planning and rail trail planning. In fact, I have an interview tomorrow for a project. About 3 or 4 years ago, well, I guess it's probably 4 or 5 years ago, I saw an ad through Sustainable Communities that they were looking for a new chair. And it was interesting because I was not very involved. I was not involved at all with SCD. But my company promotes and really encourages us to get involved with professional organizations. It's good for you personally. It's good for our firm. It's good for you professionally. And so I responded to the ad, and Rob Kearns, who was the first chair of the division, he called me immediately and said, well, if you're interested, let's talk. And I have to tell you that it's a great group of people to be involved with, as Matt described. I'm looking forward to going to San Francisco next week, in a few days actually. And last year I was unable to go to the NPC. I really miss the people that I work with through SCD, because they're a great bunch of people. Although it does require some time and some effort, what you get out of it is much, much more than what you put in. So I hope that all of you that are on the webinar think about joining or getting more involved with the division. It'll lead to bigger and better things with APA. For instance, now I'm on the Water and Planning Network Committee. I'm also on the membership committee. It seems that once you volunteer for APA and your term runs out, they always find other things for you to do, which is awesome, because you get to meet great people from all over the country and get exposure to things that you might not otherwise be exposed to. So that's my story, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Matt, both of you. So just as a reminder, you can submit questions using the Q&A function built into this webinar platform. I believe it looks like a little chat bubble, and you can enter them there. We've entered a few just to get us started. If you can't quite figure it out, feel free to just submit the question via the chat. That'll just go directly to the presenters, not to everyone else, and we will submit it in the Q&A function instead. We're happy to help. Let's see. Fiona and or Kate, would you all like to start off with a question?
Sure. So this is Fiona again. I would like to just ask our attendees where they're at currently in their academic careers, if they are considering enrolling in a master's program or already enrolled and thinking of changing pace, or if they're in their undergrad and they're kind of conflicted about how they want to go forward and how they can get more involved in a planning program. That would probably be my initial question for the group to kickstart.
Oh, in terms of what you'd like to learn from the attendees? I see. Okay.
Yes.
Let's see. I think we were planning more for questions for the panel, but we can certainly, I think that would be good information to know. If people would like to share that, you can put that into the attendee chat box. I think the audio is turned off for the attendees to say that out loud, but if you want to sort of give us an update or let us know some information about where you all are at in your academic career, or if you're an early professional or something like that, just send us a message, and then that would be good for us to know. And I guess we can keep track of that as it comes in and take a look at that. Let's see. I guess to get us started on the questions while we're waiting for people to sort of give their input in that way, I guess I would have a question for Scott and Matt, and for Fiona and Kate, if you all have input on this as well, that'd be great. You know, I have had several great mentors in my career, and sometimes there are people who are expected, you know, supervisors I've had, and sometimes there are people who are kind of unexpected. And I was wondering if you all had any experience, you know, finding mentors that were influential in your career, and sort of how you found them or how you came across them, and whether you have any advice for people seeking that kind of mentorship.
Scott, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think that along the way, you always find people who really help your career, people who will push you. Sometimes they find, you know, a position for you or lead you to great projects. I've had a couple clients that I've worked with for a very long time that I would consider to be really strong mentors. One was they're both developers, believe it or not, and one works for a development firm in Boston. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He's an attorney. His name's Buzz Constable, if anybody is here from Massachusetts. But he's a developer. He's an attorney. He is very active in our local, our regional planning agency in metropolitan Boston. And I guess the reason he's been such a good mentor to me is that he has brought me a lot of great projects, which has allowed me to gain great experience. He's been tough. He's a smart guy. Can be challenging to work for because he is so smart, but at the same time he pushes you. And there are plenty of times when I have worked on projects and had to work some late hours or a Saturday or a Sunday, gone to hearings with him. But he's always been pushing me to learn, whether it's about site development, whether it's about site planning, permitting. Not only has he hired me to work on probably 15 projects or so, but he has recommended me to a number of other clients that have helped me gain more experience. And so I think that, you know, he's about to retire, and I keep telling him that I owe him a dinner, and he never takes me up on it. But it's certainly been a good relationship. Another client is a friend of mine. Does work all over the country, and right now he's doing hotels. He used to do senior living centers. But he has always been somebody that I can count on. I can talk to him about, you know, work, jobs, personal. He's become a personal friend. His name is Rick Mileby, and he is the president of FPG Development Company. Lastly, Lisa Brothers, our president, she's also been a good mentor to me. She has definitely pushed me to expand my experience. She certainly encouraged me to get more involved with APA and further my career in the planning direction rather than the engineering direction, and has also become a good friend. So I think you have to look for people, and I always tell my kids this: look for good people, try to learn from them, try to give back, and usually when you give back and volunteer, you get an awful lot more in return than what you give out. So that's what I have.
Yeah, I probably have several as well. I'll kind of keep them brief, but I think one of the most important ones was as it relates to sustainable communities, was a gentleman that I looked to hire at one of my previous firms, a gentleman by the name of Aaron Tooley, and he came with a broad background in sustainability and was a former regional coordinator and presenter for the Climate Reality Project, and would do kind of train the trainer sessions all over his region, I think in the South and Texas. And I went to hire him at my previous firm, and he didn't really have a background in what we do, the traditional types of planning and comp plan and codes, and but he was just an impressive individual overall, and I was given the opportunity to bring him on board on my own decision, and I felt like I could get him up to speed on what we did, but at the same time, he really got me up to speed on issues related to sustainability. And one of the first things we did was we proposed to do the buy right session for APA's Sustainable Communities National Conference. And the two of us were selected. We were going to talk about partnering for sustainability, and we kind of, with our allied organizations, and it came down to the last minute where one of us was going to be the moderator, one of us was going to represent APA, and at the last minute, Bill Anderson, the current president at that time, said he wanted to represent APA on the panel. And so we went down to one of us, and this person who had done tons and tons of speaking across the country said, you know what, why don't you take this opportunity and you do the moderation of this panel for the SCD? And that was really my intro to sustainable communities. And from that point forward, I've been fully involved with the division. Over the years, for the past 9 years, we've actually worked together. I left that company, eventually brought him over here, and today we still kind of balance things off of each other. Me to mentor him in traditional planning, him to mentor me in the background of sustainability and resilience. So that's one of the main ones. And as Scott said, there's just tons and tons of opportunities. But I don't want to negate the fact that there are opportunities to learn from the negative side as well. I had a series of bosses over the years who were not really good bosses, and they weren't great for my career, except to learn of what not to do when I got to that level of position. And so don't negate the fact that sometimes even bad bosses have opportunities to learn from. And when you do meet up with some good bosses like I have now at this company, it really makes you feel good about where you're going, because you kind of see the other side of it. So that's kind of some of my thoughts.
Great, thanks to both of you. We have been getting some responses in from the question Fiona asked about where people are at in their sort of educational career path or other paths, and it looks like we have several people who are sort of working on a master's or a current graduate student. We have a few transportation related folks. Some people who are graduating recently and or graduating soon rather, and looking to transition to the professional arena. And some people who, and actually the next question comes from someone who has a master's in planning and worked for several years in policy research and is now in a GIS certificate program. They're now sort of a stay-at-home parent, and they're considering options to return to the workforce in a sort of freelance or part-time way. And the question is what advice you might have about finding sustainability-focused organizations that might be likely to utilize part-time or freelance labor, sort of as this person is re-entering the workforce. Any thoughts on that?
And I'll throw out that that can always be difficult, We have several, and at least in our company, we have several previous full-time employees who have since left to stay at home and are able to work with us for at least for the past 5 years under contract to work on projects that are, you know, really not time related, meaning, you know, if they have 10 hours a week to plug into something, they're able to do that and get paid for it. I think outside something like that, one of the first thoughts would be to identify a group and start to volunteer and start to build that trust and eventually move into taking on increasing responsibilities. Don't be afraid to, if you're working on your resume, to be honest. When I worked for the public sector, I hired a returning mother who had been out of the business for 7 years and framed her resume to talk about all the things that she had learned while gone for 7 years. And it's really about, and we'll probably get a question later on this, but it's really about the quality of your cover letter, the quality of your resume, the quality of your knowledge of what you're trying to do that will impress people. And most employers understand some of those identifiable gaps in your resume.
So
I guess I would. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. So my firm has a part of our culture here is work-life balance, and so we are learning how to better balance our work and our lives. We live in our office is in downtown Boston, which was just Boston was just voted worst commuting city in the country. So for us, it's really out of necessity. I think as time goes on, and older folks who are more used to being in an office with, coworkers, move on, and the workplace gets younger. I think the younger generation is more agreeable to arrangements where you can work from home and work remotely. I think the technology has a lot to do with that too. So, as we kind of venture down this path of working remotely and work-life balance, we are getting more and more flexible. I have 2 people on my staff who work from home a day or 2 a week, and also a few folks who, work from home occasionally, I guess. We have other people in our office that do the same thing. I think that contract employees from a consulting side can sometimes be tricky because you have to make sure that you always have the work. And so, Matt, probably the same thing. You're always thinking about, do I have enough work for my employees? And for contract employees, you want to keep them busy as well, but they're not as high a priority. I know that around here in Massachusetts, we have an awful lot of sole proprietors who do planning work. They tend to be more flexible and have a network of other folks of other sole proprietors that they team with quite a bit. That seems to work for them. When we compete against them, it's a little bit tricky because their rates are a lot lower than ours. But it does happen. I think that you just have to, try to find the events, as Matt described, that have the background and the topics that you want to work in and make connections that way. Because I think making connections, professional connections, always helps. So that's the advice that I would give, is maybe reach out to some firms, see if there's some contract work. Ironically, we do have a contract worker as somebody who does contract work for us on the GIS front. Simply because we don't have enough work, GIS work, to sustain somebody for 40 hours a week. That's what I have.
Thanks, guys. We also got a message from one of the attendees in response to this question that says, and I posted the response, and they said they always see a lot of freelance work available specifically related to GIS, and that they think it's a great skill to market. And I guess I would say, from my perspective, I work for a small planning, landscape architecture, and urban design firm, and I think if someone reached out to us with a strong portfolio and said they were interested in working on a contract basis and they have these GIS skills, and if their portfolio sort of showed the different analyses they can do and their skills in sort of map making or analyses, I think I could see us potentially reaching out when work came up. And so I guess my advice would be to just make sure you have a strong portfolio that showcases what you can do, and pair that with a letter that explains, you know, where you're coming from, and send that out. In addition to what Matt and Scott are saying, I think that could be helpful. Let's see here. We have about 13 minutes left. Just taking a look at the questions. We did have one question that Fiona responded to. Kyle asked whether our speakers, Matt and Scott, were okay with people reaching out after the presentation. And I think, yes, feel free to go ahead and do that. You can see their emails up there on the screen, and you can reach out via LinkedIn we have up there as well. Let's see here. Let's see. We have a question from an undergrad student who said she has limited experience with sustainability-focused projects, and she was wondering how to go about locating a co-op that could help fulfill that goal. So maybe how to find some places to get some experience, you know, working as an undergrad in sustainability. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think for us, we always, in a consulting firm, our ability to hire folks and also hire interns is dependent on workload and what we have for projects and whether we have the appropriate work available. We always pay our interns when we have those positions. It's just our policy. I think there are some legal requirements associated with that as well in Massachusetts. So for us, it's always about, you know, we have the work. All of our work here is sustainable. I think every project we have has either a sustainability or resilience vibe to it. I think that the way that I would go about looking for work is through networking. I remember when I moved back here from Atlanta, when I didn't have any work. My wife had a job, but I didn't have a job, and I would call people. And I remember I would call the heads of different departments or you know, the heads of companies and ask for an interview. And I had a few presidents who made time for me. So I always do the same thing. If somebody wants to talk or if somebody has wants some advice, I always try to honor that request and spend some time with whoever it may be. And sometimes that leads to more relationships. A lot of times, you know, I'll often give people, if we don't have a position here, I'll give them names of people that I think might have other positions available. So I think it's you know, if you send in resumes, that doesn't really do it. I think you really have to try to figure out where you want to be in terms of your geography, and then do a little bit of research, and then, you know, make some calls and so forth. Maybe send resumes and then follow up with phone calls. A lot of work, but it pays off in the long run.
Scott, I would agree that you're thinking about how to attack this from the beginning point, that finding the jobs may be more difficult than finding a networking opportunity to start building those relationships. Whether you're thinking about it now or a year or two down the road, getting involved and going to, you know, things that are sponsored by your local chapter or division activities or section activities, whatever it is related to planning, or even, you know, as planners, we work all across the spectrum in a lot of affiliated type jobs and positions. There may be other networking opportunities out there that you can get involved with, and one, listening in is a good start. Volunteering takes it to the next level.
Hi, everyone. This is Fiona. I just wanted to add on to what Scott and Matt were saying. I really can't emphasize enough trying to build any kind of relationship that you can with anyone in the planning field that you've been exposed to, including, professors, fellow, students, alumni, any kind of like peer mentors, or career development offices that are present on campus. That was really how I got my job. Is I was reaching out to local planners in APA Massachusetts, and just developing kind of starting that initial conversation, which can always be daunting, but it really is, it goes a long way, I think that it would be in the best interest to just really reach out, introduce yourself, be transparent, explain where you are currently, where you would like to see, where you see yourself going, and just kind of, just develop any kind of relationship that you can, especially while you're an undergrad. It'll really help you in the long run, and I really can't emphasize it enough.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Let's see. I think I have kind of one final wrap-up question, but before that, Fiona or Kate, did either of you have any final questions you want to ask Scott and Matt, or any comments you want to make?
Yeah, so my question, Scott and Matt, would be, I guess, and going off of the questions that were entered, I guess, what would be your kind of top piece of advice right now, for anyone who's looking to get into planning, and feel like they're stuck? I guess your top recommendation. I know we've discussed a lot of different ideas and strategies here, but if you had to prioritize one.
What do you mean when you say
Matt?
Oh,
Sorry?
What do you mean when you say stuck? Like just trying to find an internship?
Right. Yeah, exactly. In that point where, maybe you're in the application process and it's become overwhelming, progress isn't being made, or, the applicant feels like they're not doing enough, or if they could be doing more. I guess what would be like your number one piece of advice? Because we've all been there, and it's definitely a difficult situation to be in. It can be discouraging for sure. So.
Well, I'll throw out that, at least for me, it's a physical impossibility to focus on just one thing. So I'll hit just on a couple brief, I think, important points. First is, I think planners come from a diverse background, and not every one of us, in fact, most of us won't be focused just on the traditional long-range planning that gets a lot of the press. We'll be doing things dealing with green infrastructure or historic preservation or parks and recreation or trails or active transportation, private land development, whatever it might be. Planners are able to fit in so many different places. If you're in school or just getting out of school, there's a couple of key points. One is, particularly while you're in school, is learn your software skills. It's critical that coming out you're able to use the various software tools that you think you'll need for your career. Scott's probably a little bit more heavy on the design side and dealing with AutoCAD and SketchUp and things of that sort, but as a planner, you also really do need to learn GIS, particularly early in your career. As well as, at least from my standpoint, the Adobe suite and having full comprehension of InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop. Those are critical important. And as we move to more highly graphic forms of communication, those skills will definitely keep you on the forefront of what we're doing. However, that doesn't mean that you kind of disassociate yourself from being a good writer. because even when you go to more graphical or highly graphical formats, the less words on the page means that every word has higher importance. So it needs to be clear, concise, well written. I think those are very important. The second thing is when you think about those two things I just mentioned, apply that to your resume and really take the time to dial in a quality looking resume, not only in the words on the page, but how it is laid out and looks and feels. Do your research. And then focus on, I know it's in this day and age, it's really easy to just, respond to 100 different applications out there. And it's good to get that out there, but in my standpoint, I think you'd be better served focusing more on high quality ones or things that you really connect with, and you're able to give your personal kind of touch and detail to. Almost every one of my jobs, I may have put in an application, but I followed up with some kind of phone call. In my later career, that was actually, in several cases, just the phone call outside of even an established process because of the network that I created and the projects that I had kind of accomplished over the years. So the last point would be make sure you expand your relationships, your networks, get involved, volunteer. They're great resume builders. They're great connections to future work, whether it's because your resume looks so solid or because of the people that you know. And if you're considering a career in the private sector, it doesn't matter if you start public or private, but if you really want to be successful long term, from my standpoint, it does help. It does make you a stronger private sector planner if you've had time in the public sector and really understand what you're planning for. Some of my high points, I think, are worth focusing on moving forward. Wrapped up into one long paragraph. There we go.
I would agree with just about everything that Matt has said. When we're looking at people, we're looking at technical skills that can be applicable to some of the projects we do, whether they're graphics, whether it's writing, whether it's some kind of technical analysis. Again, our projects tend to be a little bit more technical, I think, than typical projects. But for me, writing is super important. Somebody that can write is as good as gold. So I think that's really important. I tend to think that starting out in the private sector is more, I think it's easier. I think when you start out in the private sector, you get exposed to a lot of different things because of the types of projects that you're trying to attract. And then you can make a decision about, what you want to do going forward. If you want to focus in a certain area, if you want to stay in the private sector or go to the public sector. I found that people that start in the public sector and then move to the private sector have a little bit of a harder time because the pace in the private sector is a little quicker. Sometimes it's a lot quicker. So I think it's easier to go from a quicker pace to sometimes a slower pace, but that's just my experience. Other people would argue differently.
All right. Well, it's 2 o'clock by my computer here, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But thank you to Fiona and Kate. We're excited to have you on board as our student co-representatives, and thanks to Matt and Scott for sharing some of your thoughts. And all should feel free to reach out to any of these panelists with questions or comments, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak with you. As I said, we're going to have this recording up on the website, sustainableplanning.net, so feel free to check it out there. It should be up this week at some point to see if you need contact information or other information from the PowerPoint. You can see it up there. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.